Why is it that everybody wants to make a game, but nobody really does? Nobody actually follows through and finishes a game. Well, Ken Levine, he's the creator of BioShock, if you didn't know, and he's also making a game called Judas, which he's worked 10 years on. Ken Levine and I talked about this, and I'll give you a little hint. It's because, well, making games is probably the hardest art form out there. This isn't meant to discourage you. This is actually meant to encourage you. At the end of this video, I think you're going to be very encouraged to follow through and finish your game. Before we dive into the conversation with Ken, I want to say a huge thank you to Ovani Sound. They are the sponsor of this video. They are what makes this podcast possible. Making music and sound effects for your games can be very tough and time-consuming and confusing, but Ovani Sound, they make it easy with their premium music and sound library designed specifically for game development. That's pretty cool. Everything is royalty-free, including commercial use, and also there's no crappy AI used in their production. As a special deal, they're reopening their huge Black Friday bundle for just one final week, and it's just for you guys. This bundle includes 17 brand new sound effect packs, like guns, explosions, and environmental ambience, and many other essentials for games. And plus 20 music packs, each with 3 intensity levels for seamless dynamic control in your games. You also get a voice pack from professional voice actor Rory Childs to fully voice characters without AI.
Gotcha.
Plus their plugins for Godot, Unreal, and Unity to simplify sound integration and dynamic music. The offer ends in 1 week, so for those of you who missed the Black Friday bundle and you want everything you need to start making your game sound amazing this year, definitely click the link in the description to check it out. Thanks Avani Sound for making this conversation possible. Let's jump right in.
You just have to take risks at the level you can take them. Yep. And cross your fingers and be honest with yourself and put it in front of people and make sure you can course correct to the best of your ability and hope and pray.
Sure. Do you think that the game industry is particularly more like gambling than most industries?
Well, what do you mean? Because like in terms of the economic model, I mean...
It seems to me that the game industry is so expensive because it's like every art form combined into one. You know, it's like this giant culmination of art forms. And you're taking a gamble on every single art form, and that your team is like the perfect team for this one thing. So it just seems like a scarier business model. And people listening right now, they're thinking, I don't want to get into making games if this is a huge gamble.
I would say that, I'll say a couple of things. Yes, it is. I think I've worked in a bunch of art forms. It is the most difficult art form I've ever worked in times 1,000. When you're a screenwriter, you want to add a character, enter Jim, right? If I write enter Jim in my game, it's concept art, it's character modeling, it's rigging, it's animation sets. It's, oh my God, turns out Jim's a terrible character. Well, too bad, right? You better fix it because we can't remodel him. And that scales across the budgets, right? But eventually you have to live with things. Like there's a bunch of stuff that we did. Like I wrote the "Would You Kindly" scene in BioShock very early in the project, and I'm like, I wrote this scene, I thought it was really good. Like, okay, now the rest of the game has to sort of lead into this scene. And I knew a bunch of things about the game. It's not like I knew nothing about the game, but I had to live with that because that was one of the most expensive animation things we had ever taken on at the time. So we animated it. We had an actor come in to do a performance. We videotaped it. We animated to that performance, got a little golf club. And we couldn't go back and redo that at the time. We didn't have the budget. So I had to make the game work around that. In terms of if you don't want to be in the industry, look, I think people are not going to like this answer. But anything in the arts, if you feel you could do anything else, and I've worked in the arts and I've worked not in the arts. I was a screenwriter when I was very young, and then I was out of screenwriting because I failed out of it. And I was back in other jobs for years. And when I got back into art, got back into games, I knew that I had to do it and I didn't have a choice. And I was going to live with whatever the consequences were. And I gave up a job that was paying me twice as much on Wall Street as a IT guy.
Wow.
And they offered me a partnership to stay. And I knew it was a huge risk, but I knew if I didn't do it, I would hate myself forever. And I didn't have any money from my parents. I had about, $4,000 in the bank or something, which I've been able to scrounge together. I was almost 30 years old. I was 29. but if you're not sure, this is not just games. I don't think any art is a good field to be in because it's so competitive and so brutal. Because everybody wants to be in it, and it's so hard to make. And you could work on something, and it can get shut down. When you go and you're working in another job, generally you do something and it gets resolved, and you move on to the next thing, and that work is done. Art is much trickier than that. What if you make a game and you're all loving it, and you put it in front of testers and they absolutely abhor it? Well, guess what? Your job's not done. Yeah. You got to keep working. And sometimes you got to keep working. And like you said, you have that problem with your narrative. And we had almost exactly the same problem on BioShock. Everybody hated it when you show it to them. And then you're like, what's wrong? And you guess something that happens in the first 5 minutes, and you do it. And you take those 2 weeks and you hope and you pray that it's the right answer. But we both have the same experience. We were honest enough with ourselves and the audience that we found the right answer, and we made it work.
Yep. So it reminds me of, we'll wrap up here, but it reminds me of making a game or making a graphic novel or writing a screenplay. It's like buying Bitcoin. It's like, just be okay with losing it all. Yes, you need to be okay with burning the cash or the time or whatever it took to create that project. And I think honestly, I think most people can't handle that. It's too painful,
It has to be not a choice for you. Like, if you could do anything else, do it, I'd say, right? But some people have to make art. And it was so painful in my life when I wasn't making art. I was so depressed. Art's my salvation. And I'm so lucky to get to do it. And also never forget that every day when you're feeling it's hard, when you're feeling it's terrible, wake up and say, hey, I got paid to be in a meeting about how high the jump height should be for this robot, and who else gets to do that? And look, I've been through it. One day I'll do an interview about all the shitty, horrible things that happen, in my career. But I kind of wasn't surprised because I was in the film industry. I was very young, and I saw the shitty, horrible things that can happen in that career. But at the end of the day, making art is a blessing, and I feel incredibly fortunate.
Is there anything else you wanted to leave the people who dream of making indie games and get in the game industry? Is there anything else you want to leave them with?
Look, I think one of the ways to marginalize risk is if you can make games at night with your friends and stuff and keep a day job, so you minimize your risk, right? Do something as a product. And when I used to work, I used to go home from my day job and I'd write screenplays at night, right?
Yeah.
And it was hard, right? Because I put on plays. Like, I remember I was in New York and I was working a full-time day job. I go home, go to the gym, go to rehearsal, go home, do rewrites from rehearsal, wake up early in the morning, and it was hard, but I did it because I loved making art. And but if you can marginalize your risk in any way, right now there's so many tools, there's so many ways to meet people, to do stuff. It's just coming in for a job interview. If you've done something, you've done a mod, you've done a project, you're going to be way ahead because you know what it's like to ship something without having to risk your whole life on it.
Oh yeah, that's great advice, especially people in their 20s.
Absolutely.
The energy starts to go away slowly the older you get, and
kids 20s,
come, right? Oh yeah, kids come, marriage, life happens. Yep. When you're in your 20s, you've got so much time to burn, and don't burn it watching Netflix or at the bar with your friends. Spend some time building a project. I think that's really, really good advice. And just remember, don't forget to check out Ovani Sound below. They are the sponsor of this podcast, and they make it possible. Thank you, Ovani Sound. It's also a really good value for the price. It includes a ton of essentials and everything you need to start making your games sound professional. The offer really does end in just 1 week, so go check it out by simply clicking the link in the description.